This watercolor demo is really about maybe a sort of unusual topic for a subject for a watercolor demonstration, in that imagine we've just had a heavy rain shower and then the sun comes out and we've got some very shiny surfaces to contend with. Hello, my name is Tim Wilmot, a watercolor painter, and I produce full-length video tutorials with commentary, which will help you hopefully improve your watercolor techniques and create some great looking paintings. So in this demonstration, as I say, I'm going to cover a painting of, this is a scene in Bristol, near to where I live, and it's just rained. The sun has come out. It's not summer, it's a winter scene, so the sun is fairly low in the sky. Actually, let me just take you to where we are in location-wise. So let me just zoom into Bristol. Let's just zoom in here, Bristol, UK. And we are, I shall show you exactly where we are. We are standing on a street called Colston Street. We're just in this intersection here. If I go into Street View here, oh, almost bang on, missed the joggers. Let's just go down to this pedestrian crossing. There we are. That's almost pretty much where we are. Looking up, I think this is Lower Colston Street or something like that, but we are on Colston Street, central Bristol, looking slightly up, so there's a bit of perspective to contend with. Let me go back to my source photo. Yeah, so a little bit of perspective to contend with, but it's contre-jour. So again, as you've seen in my previous videos, if you've seen lots of other watercolor videos, contre-jour is a very popular theme in watercolor. You get nice shapes appearing, silhouetted shapes, light against dark, dark against light. Certainly easier to pull off than if the light is behind you. Light coming towards you, a lot easier, because you've got these high contrasts in values. So if we look at the scene here, we have, well, look at this bright light here, the sun low in the sky coming towards us, reflected against the road surface here. So sun there, light there. And we have a row of cars. Well, we've got a row of cars in the sunlight and then a row of cars in the shade. We have a figure here. Certainly we can make play of that. We have to have figures in a street scene to make them more interesting and to add some context in the relationship of sizes, and to maybe add a focal point as well. But look at, if I just zoom in, look at the light around that figure there. This is what you get with contre-jour. Dark figure, slightly against a lighter value, but nonetheless you've got this light, almost like a halo around that figure. So I'm going to bring that figure further forwards. These shadows coming towards us, a mixture of hard edges and soft edges, then quite a difficult surface to deal with, this road. It's not a smooth surface, it's a rough surface. The water is sort of, it's settled in the little troughs in the water surface. It's just beginning to dry up, but we've got these soft edges appearing and some hard edges. Look at the hard edge across the top of the edge of the pavement there. Quite a hard edge, and especially there as well. And hard edges on the car rooftops as well. From a composition point of view, now this is, well, looking at dimensions, this is widescreen landscape, which is sort of 16 by 9. dimensions. I normally go 4x3 with my paper, normally landscape. So I'm going to have to cut off the left-hand side, cut off the right-hand side, concentrate on this middle area here. There are some things I won't bother with. This A-board sign, the bicycle stand here. Certainly the bicycle stand I'll do away with. The A-board sign at the moment I'm sort of 50-50 whether to have that in. It sort of adds something to the composition, but I'm not sure what this little dart thing is on top there. But yeah, I'm undecided about that A-board. Anyway, let's see how we get on. So, paper I'm using is Saunders Waterford cold press paper. Really any watercolour paper will do, but I do recommend Saunders Waterford. They are a UK manufacturer, very good quality watercolour paper, but I know a lot of my artist friends use Arche, Fabriano. There's quite a few makes out there, but I use Saunders Waterford. This is cold press, or NOT, not, and this is medium texture, 300 grams. So first step in the watercolour is do my outline drawing. I might have done a thumbnail sketch just to sort of get an idea of the composition and any focal point and values as well. But most of the time I just go straight into the painting with this drawing stage. So I'm using a 3B pencil, quite soft. Now I am changing a few things. For example, there, just kind of sneaked in on the left-hand side a bit more of the houses going up the street. It was quite narrow on the source photo, but I'm really just changing things a little bit, being a bit sneaky, and just changing that viewpoint to help the composition, just to have a little bit of a curve of the rooftops, curve of the street level, up the street to the background, and then on the right-hand side, thinking about those buildings and the perspective of those buildings. So they're almost sort of 40 degree. The top level of the rooftops is almost sort of 40 degrees off of the horizontal, something like that. So getting that right in the composition and getting those perspectives right is quite important in this drawing stage. As is the row of cars, which I'm trying to have that row just slightly left of centre, and then the figure, which was in the distance on the source photos. So I've got that coming a little bit further forwards. And then this lamppost. This is quite an old part of Bristol, so I'll probably make it sort of more like a vintage lamppost. And those cars will have some dark shadows in front of them. Sometimes I do draw in the shadows, as I'm doing now for the building, but for the cars I haven't actually done that on this occasion. But I need to get in that edge of the shadow of the building, and on that building on the left hand side, as I said earlier, I've cropped the very extreme left hand edge, and I'm just really concentrating on the sort of central part of this picture. Some tricky curved windows going around this quite unusual curved corner to the building. Not sure what sort of shop it is, but it's got some bright windows. There's particularly the ground level. There's some light on. There's Also some reflections. Behind me, there are some buildings, maybe this bright light, this bright low level winter light is coming behind me, bouncing off that, going into that building. So I need to just give the impression of a light window there. Now, in the source photo, there are some distant trees, distant winter trees, with their bare branches. And for me, on this occasion, I'm going to miss out those trees. I don't think they lend anything to the composition, so I'm just taking an artist license and removing those. These cars, I need to emphasize the rooftops, with the sunlight hitting them, but really most of the rest of the car is sort of lost in the shadows behind, the shadows on the surface there as well. So they're going to be kind of lost in there. So that was step number one, outline drawing, making sure that's right in my own mind. Use my rubber, use my eraser if I've not got anything right. Now, because I do want some very soft edges on this painting, very soft edges around the bright light in the sun and the bright light hitting the road just below the car, just below the central row of cars. I'm wetting the whole paper, so I'm just using a Hate brush here. Could use a sponge, just something that's quite soft, so I don't want to damage the paper. Saunders Waterford is very robust paper. It'll take a lot of abuse, but I just want to be careful here and not damage it unduly. So I'm using this Hate brush, any sort of wide brush really, or a big mop brush, just to lightly go over the surface with clear water and an even coating, so we can see a shine on the surface. So I don't want it ultra wet. It's just sort of at that moist stage. It's still got, if I look at the paper against the light, it's still got a little bit of a sheen, a little bit of a shine on it. So carefully going around the cars, because I do want them to be kept light. I do want a hard edge there on the rooftops. So keep going. As I'm doing this, the paper is buckling a little bit. There's some undulations being created. This isn't stretched. The paper is not stretched. I'm often asked, do you stretch your paper? Well, I don't. It's just secured, as you can see, with some decorator's masking tape, which is quite strong. That's securing it to my painting board. But the paper is buckling with this sort of pre-wetting stage, and it doesn't matter as long as the water's not gradually accumulating in the sort of little troughs that are occurring here, little valleys that are occurring. So as long as it's sort of fairly even throughout, is going to be good. So I'm just waiting now for the paper to dry a little bit, just a little bit too wet at the moment. And I'm thinking about going in with the sky first of all, which is, well, if I describe my palette first of all on the right hand side. So from the top, I've got neutral tint, or you could use Payne's grey, and then coming down I've got burnt umber, then burnt sienna, yellow ochre, viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, after ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and then a bright red, Winsor red. A lot of these paints are Winsor Newton, and then I've got a light red, cadmium orange, and yellow. Most of these colours I will not use in this painting. This is a painting of a lot of contrast, but a limited palette. So I won't be using any greens or yellows apart from yellow ochre, quite limited. Now I've started the sky. I've got a lavender right down the bottom of my palette. I've got a lavender, which is a nice sort of sort of chalky consistency, because it's a great colour, quite a unique colour, but I think it's just great for certain skies. And it's sort of that, it's like an opaque colour. It's not going to, in a wet condition, not going to travel too much. So I just mixed in a little bit of that lavender with anything fairly dark in my palette. So on the right hand side, the mixing areas there, they're not often cleaned, and you do end up with some quite interesting colour combinations. So going into that light area with the paint is going to dry a little bit lighter. So with watercolour, you've got to go a little bit darker than you think because of this, because of it to a lighter value. And the paper being wet, we're getting these nice soft edges around those lighter areas. So I've changed, as I've come down into the building areas, I've gone into more of a predominantly yellow ochre colour. And now, as I did with the sky, painting around the lighter area. It's quite darker on the right-hand side, so I'm going a little bit darker there. Ultramarine blue. Just going a bit darker. Ultramarine blue, neutral tint, just pick it up there. So these little areas where I've got the paint, they've got an open side to them, so it makes it really easy just to drag the brush over that. And as I'm doing here, just dragging the brush from left to right over the surface. Now, it's quite dark by these cars, so I'm going in with a darker colour. Paper's still quite moist. It's all giving me some quite nice soft edges. And notice I'm going right over the masking tape as well. When I peel off that tape, I'm going to get a nice crisp white edge around the painting, so I don't need to worry too much about being too precise. Here I am just mopping up the excess moisture because there's a slight slope on the board of about 10 degrees or so, maybe 10 degrees or so. So the paint's going to gradually come down the paper, keep traveling down there. Now I'm just thinking about the lighter area on the ground. I think I do need to just cover this up just a little bit there and on the left hand side, so cover it up just a little bit more on the right, a little bit more on the left, and that's sort of it for that first wash stage. So it's predominantly wet on wet, that stage, to get those soft edges, the soft sky, that bright sky, and then the brightness hitting the road, trying to get that soft edge around that. And just, I will be speeding this up very shortly with a hairdryer, but and now I'm just letting it settle, just let it, the watercolor is still traveling into the paper ever so slowly, not too quickly, and just let it do its thing, basically. So after the wash has dried 100%, what I normally do now is go in with darker values, and the painting will start to appear. It looks like a total mess now. It will continue to look like a total mess until closer towards the end. I should have actually mentioned the brushes I'm using. So the first wash stage, I was using a Raphael synthetic mop brush, size 6. This is a soft aqua brush, and it's an imitation squirrel, Petit Gris imitation squirrel. Excuse my French. And yeah, I mean, it's got the sort of it's got the feeling of a natural squirrel brush, but a fraction of the price, and very good water retaining capability, good edge, good point to it, good maker brush. Now the brush I'm using now is a bit smaller, so this is a Jackson's, which is a UK brand, but there's so many brushes like this. This is a pure squirrel mop, and it's a size 10, so a diameter of 10 millimeters. I'm painting the window of the shop and the door because I'm going to go darker around that, but I want to make sure there's a hard edge around that window. So I paint that in first of all, and while it's drying, so I can get the hard edge, while it's drying, I'll then nip over to the right hand side and start doing that, really starting from the middle and then work my way over to the right. So first of all, the background, there's this sort of gap between the left-hand buildings and the right-hand buildings, quite dark. I don't want to go too dark here, so got to be a bit careful. And so using the fingers now, I've just noticed it maybe is a little bit too dark in value, so use the fingers, just smudge it out a bit. It's in the distance. I don't need to spend a lot of time doing any detail work around this. It could be, well, we're going up, it's the end of the street. There's some more buildings beyond on the other side of the street that we're going into. So don't need to worry too much about that. But the buildings on the right-hand side, they're a shade or two lighter. And using this quite carefully controlled brush marks of using this squirrel mop brush with a good edge, and I suppose a sort of medium amount of an average amount of a medium amount of water on the brush, so it's not too wet, not too dry, enough water to continue over that building, and it's quite sort of a bit of yellow ochre in it and a bit of burnt sienna, neutral tint there, ultramarine blue. It's a corner of one of those buildings. I'll just sneak in a little light top to the rooftop. And as I come down, I want to go a little bit darker towards the tops of the cars. Now I'm using my brush marks in all sorts of different directions, being careful not to paint over the tops of the cars, but going darker as I come down, and then using the edge of the mop brush, that little indentation between between one car and another. Keep mixing burnt umber, ultramarine blue, neutral tint. And as well as going a bit darker, I am going a little bit thicker as well. So there's now more paint to water ratio. Not an excessive amount, but just enough to make it darker, make it thicker, and it's not going to create any sort of blooms or cauliflowers in the painting, in that wash surface, in this wash surface. Over on the right hand side on the road surface, so the rain has stopped and we've got quite a difficult road surface to deal with, in that there's and I think using dry brush marks will be the best way of trying to handle this, where you've got little bits of light touching little chippings and the uppermost part of the road surface, and then there's these little indentations where the water's gone in, and that's going to create a little bit of darkness on the road surface. Now below the cars, coming down quite dark. And using this mop brush is quite good, but the surface is fairly rough, not too smooth, and then just dragging quickly. The brush at this stage doesn't have a lot of moisture on it, so dragging it over the surface using the side of the brush, using the side of the brush head, we get these nicer marks appearing. I'll paint in the cars while I'm at it, because I want them to be lighter and a soft edge as I paint in the sides of the cars, and coming down to the road, coming down to the street level, certainly a soft edge where we come from the car down to the road. There are a few little hard edges going up the road. This street has obviously been maintained many times, and it's been dug up and filled in, dug up, filled in, dug up, filled in. So there's lots of sort of like a patchwork of surfaces here. Sort of testament to all of the maintenance work that's been done on it over the years. And I've got to try and give a hint of that as I'm painting in that foreground with a few hard edges. Right, the base of the cars now, the surface is still moist. This will dry lighter So I'm having to go a little bit darker than I think. After the right-hand side, I will now paint the left-hand side. I could have actually started from the left-hand side first. Being right-handed, I've always got to think about the direction of doing these darker values, and sometimes it might be safer to start in the top left corner and then sort of work your way, or work my way over to the right. But I painted in those shop windows. I wanted them to dry first, so that's why I did that first, then went over the right-hand side, and now the left-hand side. So I'm going to start fairly dark at the very top of the building, get a sort of sharpish edge to this building, and then paint around the window with a dark yellow ochre. So I've mixed in yellow ochre with neutral tint, yellow ochre there, neutral tint, yellow ochre, and really almost mixing it on the paper. Just sort of picked it up, bit of neutral tint, continue down the right-hand side edge of the building, sharp edge against the sky. Excuse the slight glint on the surface of the paper because of the angle of my light hitting the surface and then going up in the camera. There's a bit of a glare there. Now, behind the figure and connecting the left-hand building to the background, I've got a sort of a building that's a lower building that's further away, just receding in the distance, going up the hill. And I'm going around the figure now, around the top of the head. Don't need to be too precise with this, because I can compensate with a little bit of white paint around the figure's head and around the shoulders towards the end. So don't need to be too precise at this stage. And then a little bit of a shadow in the distance. Continuing on with the building, left-hand side, very dark on the ground level. So I just need to leave a little bit of light hitting some sort of architectural details, just catching a little bit of light as it bends around that corner. Keep it quite dark around the window. Paint around the door. And just to the on the very right-hand edge of this building, I've kept that. And again, this is not too evident in the photograph, but I've kept it quite light. Just imagining this bright light, we can just see a little slither of light hitting the right-hand edge of the building. So a bit of contrast there. That dark, the dark around the window and the door, that will dry quite a bit lighter. So not too concerned at this stage about it being quite dark. And then shadows going across the pavement and coming towards us at a slight angle, almost a sort of 45-degree angle. and I want the shadow to be quite, the edge of the shadow to be quite soft as it comes towards us. So that could have been done with the paper being wet or damp, and I would have got a soft edge there. I could have put down a layer of clear water just to give me a soft edge, but I just quickly, using the squirrel mop, because it's got a soft hairs, you can get quite easily some nice edges appearing if you move the brush quickly across the paper, and on a rough surface you get a nice edge to it. Paint in the windows around the frames, not too precise, not too worried about any precise lines of these frames. But what is important is just giving the feeling of the curved windows going around the corner of this building. Hard edge now for the edge of the pavement, which I pointed out in the photograph. So it's a line not of equal width. It's sort of undulating, and it starts off narrow and gets a little bit thicker, then goes a little bit narrower. But it's going into that lighter area there. Next, I'm going to do the cars, starting from the back and working my way forwards. And they're so these cars, I can almost think of them as one shape rather than four separate cars. Just think of them as one shape, and painting in these bands of mainly horizontal darker values to indicate the windscreens. But it's quite easy to do this, to get the impression of this row of cars snaking down the hill. Not in they're different sized cars, not too precise. Perhaps a little bit darker as we come towards us. I could go a little bit darker in value. The windscreens are darker, so I'll go in darker later on once this is dried. I'm just getting in the main value of the body of the car. Now this lead car here in front of us, I'm gonna pretty much the same value. I'm coming down to the bottom of the car, and then I'm going to mix in, or I'm mixing in now, something dark for the shadows. And that shadow is going to create a little bit of contrast between the light of this lighter area that's catching the reflections of the light in the sky. And that's going to be one of the biggest areas of contrast, that darkness and the lightness, which we want to try and get with watercolor, trying to gather together, trying to connect together a very dark area and a very light area to give you a sort of, hopefully, a pleasing area of contrast. just a little bit of the side of the pavement, a little bit of shadow in the distance. Now the figure, I'm not sure if this figure is going away from us or coming towards us. I normally know when I'm when I'm doing a painting. I normally indicate maybe with a little bit of cross hatching for the face. I can determine whether this figure is going away or coming towards us, but it doesn't really matter in this case. Perhaps it's coming towards us, I don't know. Concentrate on the head, the body, but the legs, because of the bright light, because the legs are a little bit thinner than the body, they're going to be thinner than the body, and the bright light behind it, in an instant, we can't really see those legs. If I put in those legs, it just wouldn't look right. It would look too static. So I need to have that gap, almost like a gap between the figure and its shadow going across the street, which is in a lighter value, down to the edge of the pavement. Now the frame of those windows, whatever I've got on the brush, just go around. They were just a little bit too light, those window frames. That's a bit better now. So that was the darker value stage, which is very often for me a stage number 3 in the overall painting process. And this is now stage 4 with a smaller brush, a detail brush here, synthetic round brush, good edge, good point, putting in some more detail work, window frames, lamp posts, details on the cars, windscreens. Start off on the left-hand side with the frame for the window. There are a few gaps. Actually, this brush is quite dry. There's not too much water on this brush now. So, and you can see me mixing there, just picking up a little bit of moisture wherever I can find it on the palette. Bit of some definition to the window frames on the building, and a thin slither of darkness on the back edge of that building. So I'm using a lot of neutral tint and ultramarine blue here with very little water on the brush. Just keep mixing and get in a few lines on that background building just to help with the perspective, maybe lead the eye into the lighter area of the scene as well. I want to keep that right hand building quite simple. There's lots of windows and different vertical lines. I want to keep things dead simple at this stage. So darker windscreens, some front details as well to the cars, the front grille. I will put in a few windows on the right hand side just to say that it is a building. This is the I think it's called the 0 Degrees. It's a micro brewery in Bristol. That's like a bar up there. painting the windscreens of these 3 cars. Could have made them, thinking about it now, I could have made them a little bit different, each car. They're too kind of uniform in size. I could have maybe made them slightly different in size or height or colour. A little bit of a wheel arch, not too much detail. Smudge it out if I think when I paint something I quickly use my fingertips to quickly smudge it or lift off with my fingertips some of the paint. Right, an old-fashioned antique lamppost coming down where it's against the light. I don't want to have a continuous line. I want to have a gap in that this vertical line. Just connect the left hand so the left leg of that figure to its shadow. I think that just looks a little bit better. And a few vertical lines, could be aerials or something, on the tops of the buildings on the right hand side. Now this, in front of the car, I didn't have to do this, but there's sort of quite a nice sort of pattern appearing on the pavement with some sort of cobblestones or something similar, and there's some hard lines in those cobblestones. So just put a few in there. Back with my medium brush now. Down in that left-hand corner, as I did on the right-hand side, not too much moisture on the brush, not too much water on the brush. Drag this brush and create the impression of the surface, the rough surface of the road. Halfway up the lamppost, there's some kind of a little square sign, which I think is quite nice against the light sky. Just sneak that in. Could be some sort of parking notification or something like that for motorists. So with this synthetic round brush, I'm now, again with these dry brush marks, creating some definition to the window frame and the architectural details with mainly thicker paint here, neutral tint, keep mixing the top area, bit of ultramarine blue, maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson. So it's not, these lines aren't sort of black in colour, they're a little bit more interesting. A few lines for the pavement, just to show that there's some interconnecting slabs going up. A few horizontal lines on the windows. I could still be adding, with a smaller brush, still be adding a little bit of darkness to the background, just to create a bit more of a contrast around the edge, the right-hand edge of those middle cars. Another lamppost sneaking another vertical lamppost. Back to the medium mop brush, bringing the brush from left to right, just creating a few more broader strokes to help create the impression of the surface of the road. Not too many. It is a great danger in a scene like this to overwork the watercolour, to overwork your different layers, and I'm conscious of that too. A little message in my brain is saying, just be careful what you're doing, not overdo it. As I'm doing now, I'm laying on like a third layer, quite thick paint now, third layer in that top left corner. I've got to be very careful not to overcook things there from a watercolor point of view. Now, when everything's dry, I sometimes go in with a rubber or a razor just to, where I've got some bare white paper, just take out those pencil lines that might be showing through, and that brings some bolder, whiter areas into the scene. And then the next step is to, using the smaller synthetic round brush and some white paint, which could be Chinese white, white gouache, something like that, titanium white, just add in a few little white highlights here and there, not too many, just to emphasize some bright light hitting parts of the scene. Mainly I would use this for figures, well, just this one figure in the scene, and I'll take the paint right out the tube. So a brush with a good point to it, not overdoing it, quickly, top of the head, left shoulder, right shoulder, possibly one or two other things hitting, the light hitting some horizontal surfaces. Bit of the window. Do need to put some on the road surface as well. Just going up the street there. Not too much in the shade, but mainly on the, I think I need something on the right-hand side, just a few lines. As I say, this road surface has been dug up so many times. Quite a difficult surface to replicate, but not too many. And this white paint will actually dry a little bit duller, so it might appear quite bright now, but it will, if it's got a little bit of water to it, it will dry a little bit duller. Will go a little bit darker. Something on the lamppost. Head of that building on the left-hand side. Base of the building on the left. So this is the end painting. Let's go back to the source photo. Looking from Colston Street in Bristol, UK. And the sun has come out after a little bit of a downpour. We can see the sky here is quite bright. Low sort of evening, late afternoon sun hitting the scene, looking slightly up the hill. So this is my, you can see I've changed a few things. I made the cars a bit bigger. I've kind of extended this edge here, this building here to give me a bit of a backdrop for that figure. And I've maintained true. I've got this bright light in the distance, the bright light being reflected in the ground, and then these mixture of hard and soft edges on the surface of the road. A little bit of light hitting the windows on the buildings on the left-hand side. Yeah, so quite a tricky scene to do, but hope you like that. Catch up with you in the next video. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.